Hello everybody, continuing my Star Wars Black Series marathon. Today I'm going to be looking at the Super Battle Droid, and if you saw my video yesterday looking at the Battle Droid with the Stap, you'll know that one of my criticisms of the Battle Droid in The Phantom Menace is that it just looked a little bit too feeble, a little bit too spindly and a bit weak as a villain. Well, obviously in Attack of the Clones we got the Super Battle Droid, which is a lot meatier, so I was very keen to add this figure to my collection and add a little bit of threat to my prequel figures. So without further ado, let's take a look at this packaging. By now you know what to expect from the Black Series packaging. There's not an awful lot going on here in terms of design, really. We have this window display which shows off the figure in all his glory, which does look really striking, and he certainly looks the part when you put him on display, but otherwise there's not too much here. If we look at the side panel, this is where the most of the interest is, I suppose. We have this really nice illustrated image. I do think this works an absolute treat, and we have that sort of gradients in colour as well. So of course you can stack these figures up side by side on your shelf and you'll see a diverse range of characters in a consistent style, which I think works very well. If we look at the reverse of the packaging, not an awful lot going on here in all truth. We have that same image drawn up a little bit bigger and a little bit of text about the character, and then an awful lot of small print. So not massively displayable in its own right, but hey, it is what it is. Now the figure itself is pretty cool. It is of course made up entirely of unique parts. This isn't something that Hasbro are able to recycle on any other figures, so you're getting something entirely individual here, which is great, and I think its overall look is kind of interesting. Now in terms of accuracy, well, obviously this is pretty much bang on. It's hard to get this wrong, really. There's not much detail to draw out on, and I think that's both a strength and a weakness. I do like the sculpting. I think it works really, really well, but what really lets it down is the lack of paint taps. Now you can see that Hasbro tried to draw some detail out here. They've got obviously the little blue tint on the top of the helmet there, which is a nice attempt, but that's really all you get on this figure, unfortunately. And if we look down the figure, we can see obviously it's very nicely sculpted, all perfectly to proportion, but there's just not much going on in the way of paint taps or washes. In fact, there's nothing. It's just the base plastic it's molded in, which is fine, but it would just enhance this figure an awful lot. And I think a figure like this really needs it because there's not much in the way of detail or character particularly. So you really need to draw out those finer details, I think. And unfortunately, that just isn't really being accomplished here. But otherwise, everything looks the part, and I think they've done a nice job with it. Now I did want to draw your attention to something that caught me off guard. The actual head, the helmet bit, is actually articulated, sort of. You can kind of pop this off, and there's actually a little bit of detail underneath there, which is kind of interesting but very difficult to see. Which brings me neatly onto the articulation. So his head kind of lifts up and down slightly, not much. There is a ball joint in the shoulder though, which is absolutely fantastic because there's actually a huge range of motion here, allowing the arm to move out and in and all that, which is great. Otherwise, it serves as a straight swivel, so that arm can lift all the way up there. There's a hinge at the elbow, allowing that lower arm to hinge to about 45 degrees. There's also a swivel there, the other side of that lower forearm as well, allowing that arm to move from side to side, which is pretty cool. I have to say that works really well, and there's a surprising little detail, which is very nice. Now, if we look at the wrist, you will see there's a hinge there at the top of the wrist, and that's it. The hand itself is actually fixed into place. You can't do anything with the fingers, unfortunately. He does seem to have a swivel at the top of the torso there. You can't really get too much out of this, and there's certainly no bending forwards or backwards. We do have the ball joints at the hips though, so the legs will kick out to the side plenty. They'll also kick forwards and kick backwards, and then we see a mirror of what we see with the elbow there in the knee, and then of course we have this straight hinge, and there is a hinge only at the ankle. Accessories are very, very limited to just this blast effect. To be fair, I can't think of anything else the Super Battle Droid should come with, so I think they've nailed this really. I'm pleased we actually do have a blast effect. I'm pleased they thought that through. That's pretty cool. Now this just slots in, just slides over his gun on his gun arm, and yeah, it is pretty effective. I think this looks really cool and actually makes for a nice display in its own right, and it also adds a crucial splash of colour because this figure is really, really lacking that, being so grey. It needs some accents, which looks really good. And to be fair, you can create a couple of different looks. Obviously, you've got the blasting arm there, which looks really cool, and then you've got this sort of spent arm, or as if he's about to fire it kind of pose as well, to create a couple of different looks for this figure. So if you want an army build, you can have kind of two versions of it, I suppose, which looks pretty cool. And that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else to say about this figure, all in all. So for me, this figure is a 3-star figure. I think it's perfectly fine. I actually really do like the figure overall. I think it's a really fun, very different, very unique unique looking character to have in my collection. He looks very different to anything else I own, which is really cool. Definitely a plus point. I do like that blast effect. I think that works really well as an accessory. The articulation's a bit limited. To be fair, the design of the character is a bit limited, so I can't really hold that against Hasbro particularly. But what I do hold against them, I suppose, is the paint apps. I mean, you can see here on the gun arm, for example, there's nothing there. We needed some shading on that to really emphasize the fact that this is a weapon. It just looks a little bit too bland, doesn't it, I think. We've got some splashes of colour here and there, but it's not enough. I think they just needed to really just run some washes over this, make it look like it's seen a bit of battle, some scuff marks, whatever it might be, just to make this a bit more visually interesting. And that's where it's let down a lot, I think. But all in all, a very nice figure. Definitely an easy one to army build if you like to do that kind of thing. I think it's a nice figure. It's just not that impressive overall. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.